Welcome to Fellowship Safaris, conversations about people of color and their journeys to subspecialist training in their countries of origin and around the world. Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Jerry Kariajahe. I'm an adolescent medicine specialist and consultant pediatrician. Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship Safaris podcast. Now, while we were getting ready, and I think one day I will share the backstory of how we have gotten to where we've gotten to today, I realized me and the next guest have not seen each other for about 15 years. Which uzzes my age a bit. So this episode, I'd like to call it the lovely reunion. And one of the things that I think growing up, and especially when people would get to class 8 and they would be passing their class 8 exams, is that on the news, you'd get the index 1 person in the country, saying, what do you want to do? I want to study neurosurgery. And we heard this year in, year out for guys who had passed class 8. I know the system has changed now, but back then, class 8. And so I am super excited that the next person will be able to give us like a behind the scenes of what that means. However, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Please introduce yourself and your professional qualifications.
Hi, Jerry. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I don't know how to introduce myself. That's really a difficult question. But my name is, I go by Dan or Daniel Incomplete. But as a typical Django, I have like 4 or 5 names. So full names actually Daniel, Eric, Ochieng, Odhiambo.
Hey.
Many names. Don't ask me how I got by all those stuff.
I didn't even know you're called Eric.
don't even go there. But I am a neurosurgeon and complex spine surgeon currently based in Sheffield. Originally born in Kisumu, med school in Nairobi, and then I've trotted around the globe a little bit before coming to where I am.
Oh my gosh. And it's that globe-trotting that we want to be able to get into. But even before we get to the globe-trotting, I would like to take a few steps back into when you are at the dream phase of what you wanted to do when you grow up. How did the dream of medicine come about?
So interesting, actually. So both my parents actually wanted to be medics, but for one reason or another, both my mom and dad didn't make it to medical school. So from a very early age, I think I was sort of conditioned to live or them to live their life through me. So they pushed me quite a bit. I grew up in one of those sugar farm villages called in Muhoroni. The name of the school was actually funny. It's called Muhoroni Success. So wow. The question was whether that success actually translated into us being successful later on in life. Yeah. But my dad was very keen on early education. So he'd always be there for all parents meeting, bring us stuff. Whenever we'd had blackouts in those days, 5 minutes later, my dad would show up with a makeup for the class and everyone used to hate me for it. Because if it wasn't for my dad, we'd have gotten out of early night preps and stuff.
Yeah.
But my dad was very keen on that. And then luckily, post-primary school, I was able to get... Can I put just a plug in for I went to Alliance as well?
Plug it.
I got a chance to go to Alliance High School.
Yeah.
I did my 4 years before going on to med school. And the reason basically why I went to med school is I had a passion to try help people. I didn't know at that point what I wanted to do exactly. I was very good in trying to problem solve. And initially I thought I would be a neurologist. I liked the nervous system, liked neuroanatomy and stuff. I took a year off med school to do a BSc in anatomy just to explore what research opportunities were there and to get a little bit of inkling on what the nervous pathway and the nervous system was like. Yeah. But then at that point, I realized I was also good with my hands. So I wanted to try get something where I could get a little bit hands-on with my hands as well as getting the academic neurological background. And that's how I ended up into neurosurgery.
Wow. As in... all that time when we were sitting there in class, because, Yanni, I don't think you know this, but you were a lifeline for me in first year. You taught me biochemistry.
No way!
You did!
Biochem of all things.
Of all the things, man. We had a very 3D thinking lecturer, and I don't think in 3D. And, he'd have us looking at organisms and saying, this, just imagine it's behind the blackboard. And I'm just like,
I
how?
remember.
How is it behind
That's
the
hilarious.
blackboard? And then Dan, bless your soul, you'd hang back after class and just take me through it again, because I'd be like, gosh, Dan, what just happened? What was behind the board? The guy lost me and decided telling me to think behind the board. So you are a
I forget what
lifeline
his
for me.
name was.
I know.
Do you
It's
remember
just
what his name was?
I can't remember his name, but I do remember that he had a 3D mind. And it's so interesting to hear that from Muhoroni's success. I think it was almost prophetic, like Muhoroni's success, because, you and I are sitting here and you just talked about you're a complex spine surgeon and you had done a BSc in anatomy before now going into further pursuits.
But the other thing is,
Yeah, go ahead.
looking back,
Yeah.
it also pays just to be at the right place at the right time. And yes, we can always talk about, what you put the hard work in,
Yeah.
you pursue what you want.
Yeah.
But at times there's a famous saying that you'd rather be lucky than good. And I think one of the things is that I've been lucky to get a couple of mentors who our pathways have intersected at just the right time.
Right.
So once I finished med school,
Yeah.
so my then girlfriend, Naomi,
Yes.
then graduated a year ahead of me. So she went to Kijabe. At that time, it wasn't about academic pursuit. It was like, oh no, she's in Kijabe. I need to follow her up where she is.
Yeah.
So I ended up choosing to go intern in Kijabe as well. But then at that time, there was this missionary doctor called Professor Leland Albright. I didn't know who he was at that time. But then I happened to then do my internship then. And at that time, they didn't have a registrar in pediatric neurosurgery. So I ended up being the intern stroke registrar at that point in time.
Yeah.
So I started climbing the ladder sort of from the top.
Yeah.
And during my pediatric rotations, what was supposed to be a general surgery rotation, I ended up doing it in pediatric neurosurgery, which was really, really eye-opening. I got a chance to take part in some operations, meet parents, talk to this guy, write a couple of papers. Yeah. Only later on, when I look back, he was the who in who, and he's published and written big books. Yes. But I was just lucky to be at the right place at the right time. And at times, God's blessing to place you in the right position at the right time outweighs even how much hard work you can put in.
Yeah. And it's so amazing that, first of all, shout out that you decided to fuata and follow Naomi. Because it's if it hadn't been for that bit, I think it would have gone a completely different direction. And it's so exciting to hear that during internship, you already got exposed to pediatric neurosurgery. How then did you land neurosurgery and starting a program? What was that process of figuring out, where you do the program? How's that for you?
So I enjoyed my exposure at that time. I enjoyed the surgery. I enjoyed the academic pursuit behind it. I had very supportful mentors. And it was weird because my wife also wanted to do neurosurgery at the same time. So there was a bit of self-doubt, and I was like, is this real? Are we really that aligned? But then at that time, we tried getting into neurosurgery in UON, but at that time you needed to do general surgery before getting into neurosurgery as well.
Yeah.
So ended up joining COSEXA and doing general surgery for a year because I wasn't successful the first year in applying, but then applied the following year, and then we both got accepted in the same class. But before then, the funny story was, because I was a year behind my wife was the registrar when I was the intern. And we thought we'd align her on call so that it would be fun. Yeah. Only to realize that when I was on call, then I'd have to see the patient, clock them, and then I had to call the registrar on call, who was my wife. And then my wife would be like, you know what? I need to treat you like every other intern. So you need to call me when you're absolutely sure this patient needs to go to theater. And when I call her, she'd be like, so what do you have? What did you examine? What did you find? No, you need to check this before calling me. And it was a very humbling experience for 6 months. What? And I was like, I'm never ever going to do that again. But it was very, very humbling. But it just taught me, the basics. And I really needed to try prove myself more than my fellow registrars. Yeah. So that it didn't appear that I was getting the easy way out just because my wife was the boss.
Where? You guys, first of all, you should have a special marriage class
No.
for how people should handle workplace home conflict. Because that's a tough one when your wife is the one who's your boss. And usually that time, by the way, when registrar versus intern, registrars wielded power. That was the only time I can remember in life I wielded some power of sorts.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
again, the way you've just mentioned in terms of timing, because initially you hadn't gotten into the general surgery program, and then now you both got in together. So how long were you doing general surgery before transitioning to neurosurgery?
I did general surgery for a year.
Yeah.
This was the COSEXA program in Kijabe.
Yeah.
It was very nice because they were keen to train me, got a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
It was a faith-based institution.
Mm-hmm.
So things were very calm. Everyone was respectful, and it was sort of protective time, and I got to grow. It sort of buffered me until I got to UON.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to UON. The first year is back to Chiromo, a year of anatomy, physiology, and stuff like that. So I had a background in anatomy, which was fun.
Yeah.
But then it was just crazy because it was a self-sponsored program. All of a sudden, you had to balance financial requirements as well, and you're not coming, but then you have to be in class as well, and you're tired. Yeah, it was an interesting experience, and I thought it set me up for what the future held.
Wow. And now when you went into neurosurgery, did you do the entire time of neurosurgery at the University of Nairobi?
So the program was 6 years.
Okay.
Actually, it was 5 when we started, but then it was extended to 6. There was a bit of upset because it meant trying to figure out how to fund the extra year. So I did the first year, which was okay. I was also a tutor for undergrads as well.
Yeah.
Supplement some income.
Yeah.
And then I crossed over, as they say, crossing over, what was it, crossing over Chiromo Road or crossing Ngong Road, right?
Yes.
And then I went over to Kenyatta in my second and third year,
yeah.
which was very, very eye-opening. Kenyatta was, how do I describe it? Kenyatta was a war zone. It was, strictly being thrown into the deep end.
Yes.
And it's like, what the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of trauma, a lot of pathology, and you held ultimate responsibility for the patient. And at that point, the consultant didn't care as long as the patient was on the table and everything had been sought. And I remember having to literally go to the blood bank, begging for blood, even offering to donate my own blood so that you can get the patient done. And guys would be like, why? What the heck? Yes. So I did that for 3 years.
Yeah.
But then at the back of my mind, I was raised to be competitive and always wanting to be the best at what you do. And I kept asking myself, is this what it is like? I would read journals, see what publications are, and I'm like, are these guys better than me? Can I do this as much as they can?
Yeah.
And it's in that pursuit of trying to be better and pushing limits, I decided to put in an application, and I was accepted to the University of Cape Town. And I decided to quit the neurosurgery program in Kenyatta.
Yeah.
Then I decided to make the move to Cape Town. The chance was either to stay in Nairobi for another 3 years and finish and be a qualified neurosurgeon, or go to Cape Town and start from scratch again and do another 5-year program in order to qualify. So I wasn't sure what to do. At that point, I was lucky to get into the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, and they had this traveling fellowship.
Yeah.
So I actually applied for one, and I got the chance to go to Harvard in Boston for a 3-month traveling fellowship. And it was just a chance to see what we consider the rest of the world or the top of the world doing. And I was like, wait a minute, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
They are not different from what we are doing. It's just the lack of the opportunity and a lottery card of where I was born and where I am.
Yeah.
So I was there for 3 months, and I was like, you know what? No, I can do better than this. And yes, UON was great, and it was a good starting program, and I'm very grateful for what they offered me.
Yeah.
But then just because of financial limitations and also because of practice and different things we could do, I decided to jump ship and then go to Cape Town in the beginning of 2014.
So your journey of neurosurgery that started in Kenya and now transitions now to South Africa, how many years is this now in terms of attaining
Oh man.
like neurosurgery? Because you started in general surgery and then neurosurgery. So how many years was that?
So this was now, I think, 4 years down the line or 5 years after I graduated from med school. I
Yeah.
was looking around. I had age mates who had fully qualified and were consultants. One famous example is Andrew, and I have a lot of time for Andrew. But Andrew went
Yes.
straight like into MEd, and he was qualified before I was even starting my program in neurosurgery. And I was like, "What the heck?
Yeah.
Am I behind? What's happening?"
Yeah.
And the problem at times is you tend to look around you, and you at times lose focus on the goal.
Yeah.
But then I reminded myself, you know what? God has a purpose for you. God has a destiny for you. If this
Right.
is what you feel and this is what you've been called to do, then go ahead and pursue whatever opportunities you have.
Yeah.
So I go to South Africa. I can speak English, but I can't speak Afrikaans. And the pronunciation of the words are different. You receive referrals and you're like from Worcester. And then like Worcester, you Google Worcester, you can't find Worcester. And then you realize when they say V, it's a W.
Yes.
And it's actually Worcester instead of Worcester. And it's just a cultural shock in trying to plug in.
Wow.
And then I get in and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my goodness, crap. I realized for the first time that I'm actually black. It hadn't crossed my mind ever
Wow.
that my skin color is an issue, because I've always grown around people who are like me.
Yeah.
And I've never, the worst I've ever been told I have a Jang accent, but that's fine.
That's what you accepted and moved on.
Then I go to South Africa and all of a sudden I say, yes, my name is Ochieng on the phone call, and someone comes actually to meet you.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden everyone was like, what's the Chinese doctor called Ochieng? And I hadn't realized that Ochieng sounds like a Chinese name. I'm like, what do you mean Ochieng is a Chinese name? I'm as Jen as they come. But then it just took a while to settle in.
Yeah.
But then being in a foreign land, you realize, you're starting from a disadvantage and you have to prove yourself, and you can't afford to be average.
Right.
You have to put in the extra hours. You have to go out of your way to do things that other people take for granted. So it sort of pushed me, and I think it sort of helped me. So in a program that was supposed to take 5 years, I was able to finish and graduate and do exams within 3 years.
What?
So yes, so that was very, very helpful.
Wait. It's supposed to be a 5-year program and you managed to finish in 3?
So I managed to finish all the requisite exams in 3.
Yeah.
The first year was a bit, trying to prove yourself and stuff. And then all of a sudden people realize, okay, he actually knows what he's saying. Maybe he's not as bad as we think. And then because you're hungry to prove yourself, which can be good and bad, it's good that you push yourself and stuff, but it's also bad that you ignore all your social responsibilities. So God bless her. I think my wife suffered the brunt of it at that point in time.
Yeah.
Because any extra time I had, I did extra list, I did extra clinics, ran around, did papers, published, tried moving around, presented at congresses and stuff like that. But the good side of it is that then I was able to finish my exams and write my exams early.
Wow. And going to South Africa, had you traveled with your wife or was she back in Kenya?
So we actually, again, being at the right place at the right time. Initially, when we applied, they only had a spot for one person.
Yeah.
But then we said, we don't go if only one person was going. So the following year, then they had a spot for 2 people. So we actually started at the same time.
Wow.
So both of us packed our bags and then started in Cape Town at the same time and were registrars at the same time.
And completed at the same time?
What's happened then? So we are in our 2nd or 3rd year.
Yeah.
But then I think we'd been married 8 years. Cutting back a little bit soon. So my wife and I got engaged as interns when I was a med student, end of med school.
Yeah.
And then we got married, I think, halfway through my internship.
Yeah.
So my parents were like, oh no, what's happening? Is she pregnant? Why do you guys want to rush into marriage?
What? But you guys had, sorry, I have insider information, kidogo, but you guys had been going out for a while. It's not it was us on the spur thing. Yeah.
We dated like for 5 years, but still, between engagement and us actually getting married, it was like 6 months or less.
Yeah.
And we actually had to pressure both parents to meet and then organize stuff. And then you remember that was the year after the post-election violence, right?
Yes.
So here I am, a guy from the lakeside, and I'm trying to marry this girl from Nyeri. And the guys are like, what do you mean? So my parents said no. Her parents said no. And then when they realized that the other side had said no, they were like, okay, so maybe there's something nice. They actually said no as well. So the only thing that actually got our families together is both families said no.
Then they were
Anyway,
like, we are thinking alike.
exactly. Anyway,
Oh,
the reason why
wow.
I'm bringing this up is
Yeah.
we got married halfway through internship,
Yeah.
but now we only 8 years later, we're halfway through neurosurgical residence in Cape Town. And we're like, you know what? It's been a long time.
Yeah.
What do you think about having kids? So we ended up agreeing and trying for our first child, and we were lucky to have our first child.
Yeah.
But that meant she took some time off. Because of that, then she
Yeah.
ended up graduating a year after me.
Wow. So both of you end up finishing your program in University of Cape Town, and you have a baby now. So what happened from there? Were you able to work in South Africa?
So after I finished and my wife still had a year to go, I decided to do a local fellowship. So I did a fellowship in endoscopic skull-base and pituitary fellowship, surgery fellowship in Cape Town.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for about a year, but it was very interesting. So my wife came back and we needed to organize babysitting and stuff.
Yeah.
So actually, I think our child was like 3 months or 4 months.
Yeah.
We'd either meet in the garage because I'd either come from the night shift, she'd give me the baby and then go for the day shift.
Yeah.
Or she'd be from the night shift and she'd hand over the baby to me. And then occasionally, then we needed to overlap. Then we had to bring in our baby for the handover meeting, which was hilarious. So we had this 3-month-old sitting over, looking at scans with the rest of us. it was just funny. But I must say, the department was really, really accommodating, and they were really, really helpful in that regard. And yeah, so that helped until we were able to finish our training in Cape Town.
Yeah. And can I just say that kind of partnership, especially in the surgical field, because just looking even at the literature around even the kind of support that families need, like your unique situation where both of you are surgeons, the kind of support really goes a long way into the success of both people who are, in a particular surgical fellowship. So shout out to the program that supported you, and shout out to the both of you for working as a team rather than these two separate people who are trying to get some goals, done.
I must confess, surgery has been a little bit slow compared to other fields in providing support for families. And a lot of surgical programs are still a lot of bravado and, you need to work your behind off to be able to prove yourself. But that's slowly changing. And I must say the program in Cape Town was really helpful in that regard.
Wow. So shout out to that program. I think it's a great example that you've demonstrated, because I think for a lot of people, especially when both of you are in the medical field, it's always a question of who's going to make the sacrifice, who's going to hang back while the other person does this. And that's sort of like the back and forth that I've anecdotally witnessed. And then also professionally, you kind of see not the tension, but where's the sacrifice? As in who's making the sacrifice. And so thank you for sharing that with us. So what was the plan after that for both of you? Was it to come back to Kenya? Was it to stay on in South Africa?
So my fellowship in terms of technical aspects was really, really great. Had good patients, had bosses who are well versed in their field and was very, very well published. And I got to do quite a bit of hands-on, and I grew as a surgeon.
Yeah.
However, at the end of my fellowship, and this is one of those points, I came to a sort of crossroads. While my boss was very good at the academic stuff, was very good at teaching, and was very good at giving opportunities, I got to a point where I don't know how to say this. It was really, really difficult because there was this one point we got a referral. And it was not 100% a good referral. It was one of those things you could have gotten more information and stuff. But then my boss broke out into this tirade about these black surgeons are sort of, unacceptable. This is just, they're not right. Of course, they didn't see the patient and stuff. And it was more of a racist tirade. And sort of I stepped back and I was like, really? So for the first time in my life, I was like, do I just keep quiet and get my competency signed and qualify and forget? Or do I stand up and say, you know what? I think this is unacceptable. So I actually spoke up.
Oh my gosh.
And oh my goodness. No,
As a fellow.
I don't know whether as a fellow.
Waiting for our competence to be signed off.
Oh my
Hey.
goodness, I
So
got
what
there.
happened?
So my boss blew his top and he was like, you know what, this is unacceptable. You can't speak to me like that. I'm the professor. But I was like, yes, I know you're the professor, but this is not right. You haven't met this person. You don't know what they did or didn't do. It's only
Yeah.
fair that we call them back and say, yes, maybe you're missing one or two pieces of information. Could I have
Yeah.
this? And that's fine. There had been snippets of that before, but it was really undercover. But this is the
Yeah.
one point I thought that you would rather stand up and be counted. So
Right.
anyway, it just broke into this tirade and I just walked out of the room. And
Yeah.
then the boss followed me out of the room and kept shouting and stuff like that. And the following day, I actually handed in my notice. I was like, you know what? I can't work for someone like this. I'm done.
Yeah.
I quit.
What? Did you have your papers?
Of course not. I
Oh
had my
my.
qualification, but I didn't have my fellowship stuff signed off.
Oh my.
So I go home.
Yeah.
My wife was on call. My wife comes and like, Dad, what is this I'm hearing? You quit. What do you mean you quit? So
Oh. Uh-huh.
I'd prepared this dinner. I was like, I was going to explain to my wife, this is what happened. But she
Yeah.
had before she came home. Oh, it was such a disaster.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad you made the dinner, in preparation. But I can imagine that kind of frustration. You've gone so far away from home. You've made all this sacrifice. And for a lot of people, they're like, let's just keep quiet, just finish. As in, and I've had so many fellows in different experiences saying, I just want to finish. I just want to finish. This person is being inappropriate. I just want to finish. So what happened?
I had this 4-month period whereby I wasn't sure what was happening next.
Yeah.
I started applying for jobs and everyone would ask me for a reference and I didn't have anyone to give me a reference. Because a lot of jobs ask you for, can you get your last employer or your last head of department to, to give you a reference for the next job?
And you and your last head of department have had a rumble in the jungle.
You know, I told him he was a racist straight to his face, and that didn't go down well.
Yeah.
So for 4 months I struggled. I had other faculty who were able to write me references.
Yeah.
But I struggled still with the head of department because the head of department was like, yes, you might have a few points, but that wasn't the best way to put it across, which was fair. The criticism was fair. So in the end, I was actually asked to go apologize. I apologized for the way I handled it.
Yeah.
I still believe strongly that this wasn't the way to do it, but fair enough, this is it. And I finally got references, and then that's when I transitioned out of South Africa. So I actually came to Nairobi, came home.
Yes. Karibu nyumbani.
Beginning of 2018.
Yeah.
For 2 months.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Yes, I've been out for 5 years now.
Yeah.
I have a qualification internationally recognized. I'm coming to change the practice back home. I come in, I look around. First thing that hits me is traffic. And I'm like, I haven't seen traffic like this in 5 years.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Like, and then roundabouts and stuff. And I know we make fun of this, but it's actually difficult. And then I start complaining about traffic to my family and my friends. And my parents are like, what do you mean? This is life. What do you mean?
This is
Just get on with
life.
it.
Yeah.
So the problem with being abroad is you go away, you come back, and then all of a sudden you are not Kenyan enough anymore, but you're also not diasporan enough anymore. And you complain about
there's this gray in between, right?
Yeah. And people are like, wewe umetoka majuu, you're just complaining for no reason. Just get on with it. And like, oh no, you should have just bribed the cop with 50 bob or 100 bob and you'd not be in this mess. And like, no, but it's not right. Like, no. And then it's election and everyone is like, mtu wetu. And I'm like, but why?
Yeah.
You guys are like, you umekuwa mzungu mwafrika. You're such a coconut. You need to get on with the program.
Oh,
and that was difficult. It was difficult for me.
Yeah.
So spent 2 months home, went to Aga Khan, came to actually Gertrude's as well.
Yeah.
Started talking to a few guys. And at that time, at least for neurosurgery, I don't know how it is with everything else, it was heavily geared towards private practice. And then everyone had their equipment in their briefcase in the boot of the car. So you'd be a consultant, but you'd be running at 5 hospitals. So you do rounds at 6 a.m. in Aga Khan, then 7 a.m. you're in Gertrude's, then 8 a.m. you cross to Nairobi West, and 9 o'clock you are somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think I can do this at the moment. It's a little bit challenging. and therefore started looking at other opportunities out of Nairobi.
I'm so glad you stayed tuned. Please get the word out and share it with at least 3 people. Make this episode like a chain letter. Share it, share it, share it. Come back for the next leg of our safari where we'll be talking about...
I started training in 2010.
Right.
We are now in 2023. So this is 13 years later.
We're in 2024. Where were
So
we?
I've done my time, man. And I either need to decide, I either get a consultant job in the UK or I go back home.
Listeners are advised to use their own judgment and discretion when applying any information discussed in this and all podcast episodes to their specific situation. Always seek the advice of a qualified professional if you have any concerns or questions regarding a particular subject matter. You can find this and other episodes of this podcast on our website at www.fellowshipsafaris.org. You can also find all our episodes on all podcast platforms. Reach out to us on social media as Fellowship Safaris on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and our Twitter handle is @fellowshipsafar. You could also send us an email on fellowshipsafaris@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you and interacting with what you have to say about the Fellowship Safaris podcast. It takes a village to make this podcast. The executive producer and original music is done by Mokavi Maweu. The sound engineer is Tevin Sudi with thanks to AQ Studios. Graphic design was done by Benjamin Mboya. We would like to give a special shout out to Josephine Karianjahe and Melissa Mbogwa of Africa Podfest. All rights reserved by Dr. Jerry Karianjahe and the Fellowship Safaris podcast.